Let's
get into it.
about the Oscars. So, first of all, Kevin Hart was announced as the host of the Oscars. And just days after, he dropped out because of a slew of old homophobic tweets that were unearthed. Examples. Yo, if my son comes home and tries to play with my daughter's dollhouse, I'm going to break it over his head and say in my voice, stop, that's gay.
That's not a joke.
that sounds like premeditated violence.
I was going to say, that sounds like a traumatic memory that a lot of people have.
You sound like Lucius putting Jamal in the trash can on Empire. LMAO at all of the woman asking me where the pic is. I'm not passing along a pic of a naked man. That would make me gay by association. Nigga, what?
Is he talking about the many women begging him for dick pics? Is that what we're supposed to believe, that there are a bunch of women begging for Kevin Hart nudes?
Why does Wayne215 have so many pictures of me in his phone? What are you, some type of fat fag that takes pic of small black men all day? Here is my thing. I know that we have been, and we're going to get into this shit, but a lot of people have responded, particularly comedians, being like, we don't want to, they're all trying to sort of hedge a bit. They don't want to be the person who comes out and is in favor of censorship of comedy, because that ends up being a slippery slope. We've seen it happen this year. But also, can you acknowledge the fact that most of Kevin Hart's tweets weren't jokes?
Right.
He was responding to people who tweeted annoying things at him on Twitter with "shut up, fag." Like, most of his tweets that someone found were just him being like, "fuck you," or "you're a fat fag," or "you're ugly this." I'm like, that's not a joke. That's just yelling at people.
Right. So then Kevin Hart, so they found the tweets, and then he weirdly refused to apologize. So he was posting these weird ass videos on Instagram where he was like, don't listen to the negativity, and I stay off social media. And then
Kara.
he
Our world is becoming beyond crazy. I'm not going to let the craziness frustrate me or anger me, especially when I worked hard to get to the mental space that I am at now. My team calls me, oh my God, Kevin, the world is upset about tweets you did years ago. Oh my God. Guys, I'm almost 40 years old.
Okay.
If you don't believe that people change, grow, evolve as they get older.
Well, not as they get younger.
If you want to hold people in a position where they always have to justify or explain their past, then do you.
So the incredible thing is, had that video just been an apology,
right?
Had it actually just been I am 40 years old, I have changed. There's language. Because the other thing that's interesting is people, when you talk about using that word, there was a time where that was not it's always homophobic, obviously, but people used it liberally for it to be, it's about effeminate, any things related.
It's like
to
the word retard. Everybody
exactly.
used to say.
So
yeah.
I think
I grew up in the Midwest. People just threw that out.
Yeah.
As instead of saying you're dumb, they'd be like, don't be a fag.
Exactly. And so people, I think, have a little bit more understanding of, wow, there are a lot of things we used to say that were not okay, and recognizing that people change. If he had just fucking apologized in that video, and instead he did not, and then he dropped out.
He did a sleepy ass video in his bed in black and white with no clothes on, just rubbing his pecs, if you want to talk about gay by association.
But so then he didn't even, the Academy did not fire him. Kevin Hart then stepped down as host.
Right. They said they were like, just
apologize.
The bar was so low. All he had to do, they were literally like, just apologize for these tweets, which everybody acknowledges are a few years old. Not that many years old. It was 2010, after he had already made 20 movies and was definitely an adult. So this is all definitely still very much out of line. But he took it as some insult to his ego or integrity, as you just heard in that clip there. He's like, the world is mad at you. I mean, just the actual megalomania you were hearing, when actually people are just saying, as you said, Ira, these are just slurs that have no context other than you are calling somebody gay. So all he had to do was say, look, the Oscars are a new, huge platform. Kevin Hart, arguably huger than the Oscars at this point. But when the Oscars come into play and you're asked to host that, basically, the room you're in just got bigger. Apologize louder for the people in the back. There's new people paying attention now. You know? The Oscars are something that gay people fucking love. Here I am. My entire job at Crooked Media is telling you I love the Oscars, etc. So it is very...
It's also people's jobs on Twitter, just reminding me that Louis Virtel should host the Oscars.
Precisely.
Like, I fucking get it.
But also, what's crazy also is how this conversation has shifted to, well, there are other comedians who have said, like, the word fag in, like, a way they probably wouldn't have now.
All right, so Nick Cannon...
Which was, I actually find this hilarious, but keep going.
I love that Mariah Carey's ex-husband entered the fray to be like, but wait a second, Amy Schumer and Sarah Silverman and other people have tweeted fag before. Well, first of all, it's not okay for them to have done it before either. Two, I'm glad you found the one or two tweets of theirs where Kevin Hart was sending them out like he was in the fucking imitation game trying to break Nazi codes. And there's also this problem. This was the problem with Bill Cosby. This was the problem with Nate Parker. When people always try to bring up what a white person did that was bad to defend something bad that a black male did, you are not doing the world any kind of good. You're basically saying white people get to be bad, so why can't I be bad too? And it's actually at the expense of LGBTQ people who are also black.
Right. It also, I'm sorry, the bar is not Sarah Silverman. Like, give me a break. Like, no one's at, like, it just is, it fully is, and it's always men, and it is so much about, like,
straight black men defending straight black men.
Their bad behavior that they want to be able to emulate also. Like, why don't I get to also oppress women and not get in trouble? Why don't I get to be homophobic and not get in trouble? First of all, it's like, you do well to learn that. You do well to learn the fucking double standards, and you should wise up to the fact that, like, you know, it shouldn't be happening anyway, but, like, you don't get to do the same things that a white person gets to do. You are not Chelsea Handler.
Yeah, if Eddie Murphy has apologized
in the
for
90s.
What he said in his Raw stand-up, Kevin Hart can issue a fucking apology. Because let me tell you, your comedy is nowhere near Eddie Murphy at Raw level.
Also, by the way, there's something so disingenuous about comparing him to, he compared it to Sarah Silverman, Chelsea Handler, and Amy Schumer, whom all three of those women in particular on the shows they had, Sarah Silverman program, Inside Amy Schumer, and what's the other one? And Chelsea lately, prominently featured queer comedians. Like, these are people who are a longtime allies of the LGBT community, loudly, apparently, on purpose. Kevin Hart has done shit for gay people.
Well, that's sort of like what Karen said, you know, at the point where you sort of, maybe you got lulled into this sense where you thought that, like, okay, I can use fag because I have gay friends, you know, who maybe I've used the word jokingly around them. Like, I've had straight female friends say that at some point, depending on the context. And you don't get mad if the context works. This was Kevin Hart using fag as an insult. And it's also, bitch, I don't see you walking gay children in nature.
Right.
Like, there are no gay people prominently involved in your movies, involved in behind the scenes. So it's like, you are not an ally to the gay community. And it's this problem too, because it's always like when Michael Che defending him on Weekend Update. I mean, what nigga want Michael Che defend at this point? But it's like, you doing this, it always tries to position this as like, oh, these white gay people are getting so mad about Kevin and trying to stop his bag, ignoring the fact that our black community is full of people on the LGBTQ spectrum, and none of you ever do anything to support that community.
Can I also say that I found some humor in some of this? In Nick Cannon's, like, quote-unquote outing of what they did. Because Nick Cannon, I'm like, who are you talking to? What audience are you talking to? Because I was like, first of all, black people don't give a shit about any three of those women anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, who is, like, oh, they've said bad things. They're like, no one was checking for the Amy Schumer whatever it is she's doing anyway. Which it was so
People have
dumb.
called them out on racist things before, and it's been black men who've defended them.
Right. It was just so dumb.
Like I remember when Lena and Amy did something like racist, and wasn't it Xavier, that black guy online, like reached out, did this whole tweet that like, oh, let me teach you a lesson. It's like no one wants to do that with anyone else.
It was so dumb because there's a large chunk of people who didn't give a shit anyway, and then you're proving nothing by saying that they've like, okay, so they said things they shouldn't have said either. What is your point? Like, what are you trying to say?
Also, by the way, Sarah Silverman in particular has more than any other comedian I can think of addressed specific jokes she has said, walked them back, said, here's exactly why I would not fucking say this again. Here's exactly why it was wrong, and not been above criticism, which is the whole fucking thing with Kevin Hart. He can't believe the audience can talk back at all. You know what I mean? Like, the way he's like, my team told me that people are upset. It's like, how dismissive can you be of people just being like, why the fuck did you say that?
Right, and his phony-ass tweet about his son asking him why people get so mad on the internet. Sir, your son did not ask you that.
Can I also,
Sir.
So when he finally apologized, what was his tweet?
He said, I sincerely apologize to the LGBTQ community for my insensitive words from my past. I am evolving and want to continue to do so. And then...
Do it.
He quoted Martin Luther King Jr. and said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And let me say that I immediately responded to that dumb fucking tweet because I let him know on Twitter the rest of the quote, which says, the true neighbor will risk his position, his prestige, and even his life for the welfare of others. In dangerous valleys and hazardous pathways, he will lift some bruised and beaten brother to a higher and more noble life. But that's the thing.
Listen, we have been over this. In case you were confused, the Harriet Tubman rule also applies to Martin Luther King. It applies to Rosa Parks. It applies to Malcolm X. It applies to Huey Newton. It applies to, if there's a community center named after a black person, you shouldn't be out here comparing yourself to them. It should need to be said. I have already told you this. God damn it, Martin Luther King does not want his name involved in Kevin Hart's bullshit. Martin Luther King does not want his name on a tweet where Kevin Hart gave an apology days too late about some shit he shouldn't have done in the first place. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He doesn't want anything to do with Kevin Hart.
Also, days before that, the original thing Kevin posted where he's like, the important thing is I'm in love with the man I'm becoming. It's like, well, you're 40 years old. Can you be that man already? Jesus, the fuck Christ.
Also, just the bar for men in general of like, it's that thing
low.
of, it's so low, and just like the way that they'll treat, they're like, well, he was 25 years old. Okay. So he's not a goddamn child.
He's in grad school?
Yeah. It's like
At what point do men become adults?
Please, I would love a number. What is the age where men get to be held accountable for shit? Where we can say, this is an adult man? Because shit, if you're 40 years old and you are still fully figuring it out, listen, I'm happy for growth. People should grow. But if you haven't figured out the whole being a man thing,
right,
and being like a complete individual, and you're 40 years old, if you're still that lost, we have a lot of problems.
And by the way, in his continued growth, I hope he continues to reconcile with the movie Get Hard, which came out 3 years ago, in which he conflated preparing for rape in prison with regular gay culture and routinely did mocking effeminate gay voices. I interviewed him at the time and said, did you think any of this would actually ever sound dated? Or, like humor that maybe shouldn't be said or is old or retrograde. And he told me that funny is funny.
Who was in that movie with him?
Will Ferrell.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, man. Not a good move on either.
That movie is trash.
It is shocking. There is no comparison to how crappy that movie is.
Also, Will Ferrell is very tall. And Kevin Hart is not.
Right.
Did that look weird on
camera?
camera?
I do believe that was part of the dynamic.
Oh, I mean, that was a joke.
Yeah.
Why do you think The Rock keeps starring opposite him?
What movies have they been in together?
Central Intelligence.
Oh.
It just makes The Rock
speaking
look
of
taller.
The, speaking of the Oscars. Yes, right, yeah.
And so here's my thing. People keep talking about who they want to replace him. And my thing is, I would have been perfectly fine with him doing it if he'd apologized.
I have to agree.
Because, listen, he is arguably one of the biggest box office stars right now, certainly the biggest in comedy right now. It would have gotten people watching the show.
Which I'm
and
always
we know
into.
They're thirsty for ratings.
He wasn't a bad choice.
But also, my thing, like everyone tweeting like, well, Tiffany Haddish hosts, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, first of all, do you think they didn't ask Tiffany Haddish before Kevin Hart? Let's be real. People lose their minds on the internet. It's like, why did you ask this person? I'm like, Kevin Hart was literally one of the last people that they went to.
There was a really interesting article in The Hollywood Reporter, I believe, about basically why no one wants to host the Oscars. And they were going on about, it's so easy to get steeped in controversy, how it's not that much money. And for the amount of time that you have to prepare, if you're an actual celebrity, it's not financially worth your worth your time necessarily. Is that promo really going to be useful for you? So they've been having trouble, and you have to find someone sort of middle of the road. You have to find someone who is funny but not is not going to offend anyone, and you want someone who can be topical but not too partisan and that kind of thing. So it's this weird. It's a small group of people who could really do the job. And then it's also the fact that their ratings are dwindling. So they want to get someone who's going to help with that, but also someone who could help with that. That's how you get into some Kevin Hart shit.
Right. Also, it's interesting, though, because when I think of past Oscar hosts, I can't really think of anybody whose star fell after hosting the Oscars. Even like the worst example would be James Franco. It's like still a movie star afterwards. And by the way, and the reason is
even Me Too couldn't take him down.
That's what I'm saying. Also, I mean, because I think people are aware on some level that the Oscars is a very specific challenge, and even if you fail at it, you don't suck. You know what I mean? It's just like, all right, didn't work out. That said, I hope actually we take the lesson from the Golden Globes and how people are excited for Sandra Oh and Andy Samberg, because co-hosts is a good idea. It takes the burden off liking a single individual and makes it feel more like a show. Like, oh, I wonder what these two will put out. It's more kind of a jocular rad energy. So I'm excited for a duo. And by the way, seems weird that Wanda Sykes' name hasn't come up in this conversation. How has she not hosted the Oscars before?
Lena Waithe suggested Wanda Sykes.
Oh, did she?
She suggested like Donald Glover, Wanda Sykes.
I don't want Donald Glover.
I know. She just said make sure it's someone black and funny.
Yeah, I don't think that's that hard.
I mean, well, okay, fine. I'll do it, Lena. I'll do it.
Oh, is that? Oh, I see what was happening now. All leading to this.
That was why we discussed all of this. That's the point of everything.
Mom's Mabley, get up here.
Okay.
And you fell for it once again.